Hello there. I hope your Sunday has been a pleasant one so far, and I hope your weekend has been a good one. Good victories by Illinois and Mizzou over the weekend. We'll talk about Mizzou tomorrow, probably here on the Bernie Miklasz Show on YouTube. Thanks for subscribing. Please do if you're not already subscribed, and appreciate you for hitting the like button, and always appreciate you leaving comments under each video. Well, the Blues made news hiring Jim Montgomery a few days after he was let go by the Boston Bruins. Jim Montgomery, of course, has got St. Louis Blues roots. He was a player here. His first season was here. He coached the River Otters of the United Hockey League here, met his wife here, started a family here, on and on and on, and also was a very highly regarded assistant coach for Craig Berube two seasons. And then after the 21-22 season, the Bruins offered Monty the head coaching job, which he took, and he actually did very, very well. Didn't do great in the postseason, but I'm not going to sit here and judge a guy on 20 career postseason games. He's 9-11. So, but I know the naysayers are out there somewhere looking for something. You know what? And if you're a naysayer about this, I'm serious. I'll get straight to the point. Just answer me a question if you could. Simple question. Who do you think is a better coach? Just pick one. Jim Montgomery or Drew Bannister? I don't think I have to wait for you to make up your mind on that one. I assume you're probably laughing. Well, why would you ask that? It's obvious that Montgomery's a better coach. I don't know. Maybe some extended family members of the Bannister family are watching. They may feel differently. And listen, I feel bad for Bannister, but that's not the point here. This isn't about the feels, okay? This isn't about Doug Armstrong. Oh, I don't. It would be really cold. It would be kind of mean. I'd be really nasty if I fired him. I can't do that. Listen, as I like to say from time to time, can we just be adults about this, right? And can we also understand the laws of the jungle in the NHL? In the time that I'll be recording this video today for you, there will be 7 or 8 NHL coaches fired. Well, not really, but I'm just making a point for effect, right? So I'm not surprised at all that Jim Montgomery is coming and that Doug Armstrong did not wait or fool around to get this thing done. I'm not surprised that it's a 5-year commitment because Jim Montgomery is very close, not just with Doug Armstrong, but with all the Blues decision makers, including Alex Steen, who will be taking over as the general manager after next season. I just wondered if Armstrong would play some silly game to try to make it look better. Like the Blues are free falling. I mean, I actually have had people trying to tell, they're not playing that bad. They're not. I don't know what your definition of playing bad is. Got a worse record in the league the last month, and they can't score goals anymore. And a lot of their key players, as I will reveal to you, guys that need to be good, are actually declining in production this season. And some of their young guys who should be moving up and doing better, they've gone the wrong way. I actually think this was kind of an emergency situation. If you want to salvage this season, and every area of the team was underperforming, more on that later. But if you think the Blues can have time to turn it around and get into the playoff hunt in earnest, not just in math, in reality, to get into a playoff hunt, well, you got to make your move, especially when Jim Montgomery is out there. It's not like Doug Armstrong's bringing in some guy. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that's what he did after Jim Montgomery was not available to take the Blues job after last season. And there was a chance the Bruins were going to fire him at the end of the postseason, but they did not. And there's some problems there between Montgomery and Don Sweeney, the general manager. There's some issues there. We'll get into that. So Armstrong wanted Montgomery all along. I mean, 100% the number one choice for the job. And Army was, as we say, was chomping at the bit to make that move. Well, the timing wasn't right then. Montgomery was not technically contractually available. So just because Armstrong had to wait in effect for 22 games, that's what the Blues played, you don't not make the move. if you agree, or we agree, and Armstrong certainly agrees, that Jim Montgomery is a much better coach than Drew Bannister and has got a much more extensive track record, what is there to wait for? Seriously, you all tell me one reason it would be justified to wait a long time or even a relatively short time, and then maybe risk Jim Montgomery going elsewhere because he was going to get some offers. The only thing is that Jim Montgomery really wanted to be in St. Louis. So he probably would have given Doug Armstrong a little extra time to work things out in his mind and all that stuff. He wants to be here. I mean, Jim Montgomery's got St. Louis Blues roots. He played his first NHL season here. Later on, he coached the UHL Missouri River Otters. He even helped Barrett Jackman coach a Pee Wee League team around here. He met a St. Louis woman. They're married. They have 4 kids. They still have a home here. There were a lot of reasons. I mean, a lot of reasons why Jim Montgomery is just absolutely probably doing cartwheels that he's now the head coach of the St. Louis Blues, even though there's a lot of work to clean up all the things that have been going wrong. Now, let me just say this in advance. Now, some of you, because I got some of this on social media, well, Armstrong should have fired himself. He's ruined the team. He's done this. He's done that. Has Doug Armstrong made mistakes? Yeah. Has he made a lot of mistakes? Yeah. Has he spent money foolishly on mediocre defensemen? Yeah. And the big mouth here has said that, I don't know, if I count up all the words I've written or talk radio shows or YouTube video, whatever, or just other videos I've done. Yeah, Doug Armstrong has gotten some things wrong. There's no doubt about it. But I also know that the Blues' overall record under him is exceptional. And I also know that kind of won this thing called a Stanley Cup. I think that's important, but maybe I'm just being Pollyanna. I don't know. But yeah, Doug Armstrong, I got no problem acknowledging the mistakes that he's made. In fact, I've roasted him for it. And I think he was actually kind of more mad at me for a while, which is fine. I mean, I write what I believe to be accurate and the truth and stuff that needs to be said. I don't write or talk to try to please the people that I cover, right? I am hopelessly out of that mode. They got no chance to influence me by being nice to me. I could care less, all right? I just think that over the years, Doug Armstrong has done an excellent job, but with some mistakes that have hurt the Blues. But let me ask you a question. Does that mean you don't hire Jim Montgomery? In other words, I know some of you are Army haters, and that's okay. You can dislike him. I don't care. But I'm saying some of the stuff, though, it's kind of like, well, he should have fired himself. It's it's his fault, and this and that and this and that. Even if that stuff's true, like the Blues being the record that they're in now is ultimately Armstrong's fault. Well, ultimately, the responsibility does lie with him, and he did hire the coach. But what, you think this disqualifies him from making a coaching change? Like Armstrong's going to sit back in his office and say, well, best thing for the Blues would be go get Jim Montgomery. He and I are close. We got the same philosophy. He's a hell of a coach. Yeah, this is an obvious move, but I can't make it. I can't make it because I gave out some bad contracts to defensemen. So no, this disqualifies me from ever making a coaching change. Is anybody out there that's silly? I don't think so. But I had to get that on record because actually I think there might be a few. You don't have to be an Armstrong fan. This is all about, does he have a better coach today than he did yesterday? The answer is yes. Is this good for the Blues? Yes. How much? That depends. The Blues, in case you missed it, were spiraling. They were going down the sink, that little hole in the sink. They were kind of going down. They were getting flushed down the toilet. Their season was, I should say. And if you still think, and Doug Armstrong thought that this was a playoff caliber team, or he would not have gone out and made all these moves last summer. They had 92 points last year. last season, and they're on a pace for 71 points now. That is a huge drop. Okay. So if you think that you can get this team in shape and get some of the key players to perform better and to improve virtually every area of the team on ice performance is what I'm talking about, then you got to make your move. There's just no reason to delay. You have to be aggressive. Now, you may scoff at the idea. You don't have to debate me because I'm explaining what Armstrong thinks. I'm not in charge of Armstrong's thoughts. I'm not responsible for what he thinks. So I do feel I should address it, though, because I know people will look at it that way. Well, how come you didn't say anything about this? Well, I try to cover everything that there is to cover, which is why some of these videos run long, and then people complain about that. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I love doing these things. So Armstrong, you can, like I was saying, you can scoff, you can sneer, you can laugh at the idea that the Blues were going to be a playoff caliber team this year. That's what he believes. He's in charge. He controls the personnel. He went out and did quite a bit this past offseason. And this team's clearly headed in the wrong direction. I'll give you some of the particulars here in a minute. But Armstrong only hired Bannister because he couldn't get the guy he really wanted. Now, the guy he really wanted was available, and it's like, are you going to go for it, or are you going to sit back and watch things get worse by the day? Might be good to score a goal or two, more than a goal or two even. That would be really uplifting. I think I'm being sarcastic. Sorry. If you look at Montgomery's career, he's got the best points earned percentage among NHL coaches since the start of the 2022-23 season. 715 in Boston. Points percentage, win percentage, whatever you want to call it. No other team was even close. He won the Jack Adams Award as the NHL's best coach at the end of that 2022-23 season. And as a head coach, including his time in Dallas, he's got an exceptional career points percentage of 659. More on that in a little while, because I looked something up today, Mr. Research Head, and found something that was really, really impressive. Now, for those who say, well, he hadn't won in the playoffs, I agree. But does 20 postseason games in a career, does that define a coach? Like, those 20 games means he'll never have postseason success? Seems a little harsh to me. I don't think guys just take a job and they, win the Stanley Cup right away. Even Craig Berube had previous coaching experience. But anyway, I don't want to get off track here. Last week he got fired because of a lot of combination of reasons. Slow start. They had some injuries, although injuries are no excuse, because I get tired of hearing that. Every NHL team's got to deal with some nasty injuries. There were some bad moves by the GM. There was a contract negotiations with the goaltender, Jeremy Swayman, that went bad. They went on for a long time. They were contentious. He missed all of camp. He's playing terribly this season. There seems to be some philosophical differences between the general manager and the head coach. And as I mentioned, that became obvious earlier, when Sweeney told Boston Media, hey, I offered him a contract extension earlier this year. Well, that thing never got done. That tells me all I need to know about their personal relationship, or maybe a conflict in vision, or picking coaches, or whatever it may have been. They just don't. They're just not buddy. And one thing about the situation in St. Louis, the setup here, is everybody who's worked with Jim Montgomery, who knows Jim Montgomery, loves him, respects him, and is absolutely thrilled that he's coming back. And he and Doug Armstrong have a very strong bond. So you're not going to have all that political stuff going on that I think Montgomery kind of fell victim to in Boston, where a general manager has actually fired some good coaches. More on that. But then again, they're all fired at some point, right? NHL coaches, speaking of that, don't last long. A guy that I admire a lot, Neil Payne, who has a Substack blog. It's excellent. He was looking at he did some research, and the average span of an NHL head coach is 2.4 seasons. That's been steadily dropping for a while, getting even shorter. So 2.4 seasons is how long the average NHL coach lasts. That compares to an average span of 3.6 years for NFL coaches and 3.8 years for major league managers. Neil did not have any NBA coaching span data. Going back a ways, this is even better. NHL coaches who win the Jack Adams Trophy, Coach of the Year, have lasted only 2.3 years after winning the award. Montgomery didn't even last that long. The point being that he ain't exactly the first acclaimed coach to get sacked ahead of what we would think the schedule would be, right? He would be given more of an opportunity. But if Boston had fired Monty at the end of last season, Armstrong would have hired him immediately. But now with the Blues sinking and Monty unexpectedly available, he did the right thing. He hired the coach that he really, really wanted all along. And Montgomery had to know that, as far as, hey, I know I can pivot to St. Louis. I'm thinking even Drew Bannister knew that. He knew that as soon as the word came out that Montgomery was available, right? Listen, Drew Bannister is a fine guy, but he's not an idiot, right? Are you kidding me? As soon as that word came along, I'm sure, metaphorically speaking, his palms got a little sweaty. He knew what was up, and it finally happened over the weekend where they completed the negotiations with Monty. Is anyone out there really struggling with the idea that Bannister was given a raw deal? Because he did a good job as the interim coach last year. He did make the Blues better after Berube was sent away. But the one thing, and I've talked to some people that have been in this position, it's a lot easier being an interim coach because, first of all, you're there because most times in the NHL, the team's kind of turned on, or they're not paying attention to the coach that just got fired has been unable to get their attention. And that happens a lot in the NHL. So usually the new guy comes in and he's better and the team is better, not always, but often, simply because he's a new guy. And it's like, oh, okay, we got a new guy here. Let's see what he has to say. And Drew Bannister did improve the team, especially on the special teams last year. So it isn't that Bannister's a bad coach, but when you become the full-time guy, when you're not the interim, right? All of a sudden, a lot more is expected from you. You're going to undergo a lot more scrutiny of everything because you're not a temp anymore. You're not a part-timer, just filling in for a little while. There's going to be a lot more pressure to handle this job, and also the players view you as in a different way. It's like, well, and I'm not saying they said this about Bannister. I'm just saying, kind of using a hypothetical. Is this the best we could do for a coach? He's a really good guy, but man. So understand the difference between having success as an interim and then as a guy who takes over. Now, the ultimate interim coach story in St. Louis is Craig Berube, for reasons I don't even have to get into. And then he became he was also a really good head coach after winning the Stanley Cup here. But generally speaking, it's a little easier being the interim than it is being the big bad boss that's now got a contract and full-time status, right? The other thing is I don't want to hear about injuries. Sure, Bannister his roster was weakened by injuries to Robert Thomas and Philip Broberg, but that was no excuse for the team's downturn, which was getting worse by the day, and the inertia on offense where they have just fallen apart. NHL teams get slammed by injuries all the time. Take a look around at a number of star players, important players that have missed considerable time for other teams so far this season. It's pretty staggering. It's also life in the NHL. And listen, no disrespect, and I'm sorry for being a smart aleck, but some of the people reach out to me, I thought they were referring to like Wayne Gretzky in Edmonton when they talk about, Robert Thomas was out. And, then it's like, well, Philip Broberg was out, Bernie. Bannister hasn't had Broberg, and he didn't have Thomas for 11 games. Got to be fair. I didn't know Thomas was Mario Lemieux, even though I think he's a heck of a player. And I like to do names just to bring one back from the past. I didn't realize that Philip Broberg was Borja Salming. I must have missed that. Anyway, men who run franchises do not sob over injuries, because injuries are something every team's got to cope with. Coaches don't get a free pass because a couple of good players are out of the lineup. People say, well, he didn't do anything to address the depth. What are you talking about? He brought in quite a few guys this past summer. You may not have liked all of the moves, but don't say he didn't address it. The firing was harsh because there's 22 games into the season. So, but here's where, I feel like I have to just remind everyone, not that I do, but I think it's worth emphasizing. In St. Louis, running the hockey operation, Doug Armstrong fired a Hall of Fame coach, Ken Hitchcock, who had led the Blues to a top 3 record during his lengthy stay as the coach. Among other things, Hitch led the Blues to a conference final in 2016. That was the first time for the franchise since 2001. And my goodness, Army fired Craig Berube after the boys started tuning him out. The only coach to lead the Blue Note to a Stanley Cup. So if you're going to fire Ken Hitchcock, who's in the Hall of Fame now, and you're going to fire Craig Berube, 50-some years of Blues hockey, was one Stanley Cup, and huge responsibility in making that happen. What, I'm sorry. We're going to get out the Kleenex and have a pity party because he fired Drew Bannister? Like, that's where you draw the line? If anybody actually feels that way, cry me a river, man. You got to be kidding me. If anybody feels that way, but again, I've heard from some, so that's why this is even on my mind. The Doug Armstrong that terminated Hitchcock and Berube, like, he was going to wimp out and just say, oh, I can't fire poor Banny. Oh, I can't do that to the guy. He fired Hitchcock. He fired Berube, okay? I'm sure Armstrong feels bad about it, but his job is to go get a better coach if a better coach is out there. And this one comes with all the bonuses. He's familiar with the Blues organization. He loves St. Louis. He's married to a St. Louisan. Family wants to be here. They're probably, when they make the drive in from Boston after this road trip, or whenever they're going to get here, they'll probably all be like singing songs in the car. They'll be so happy. He's got blue blood, Jim Montgomery, and I think he's a wonderful fit. He's also really, really good with young players. And I think the Boston organization was trending older, and maybe he wasn't the right fit for them. But let's talk about why this had to be done some more, because tell me one thing the Blues have been doing well. They have deteriorated under Bannister terribly at 5-on-5. This season, when the Blues are playing 5-on-5, they have scored 35% of the goals. That is horrendous. That ranks 30th out of 32 teams. Their 5-on-5 game has just completely imploded. And it was bad even with Thomas in the lineup, okay? And more on that here coming up, I promise. Goaltending aside, no area of the Blues team is doing well. That's why I embraced the coaching change, but especially to bring in this particular coach. The Blues, as I record this today, they rank 30th in overall goals per game, 30th in goals per game overall, all strengths, 25th in goals against, 25th in power play success, and 24th in the penalty kill. And that explains why the Blues are 26th among the 32 teams with a .432 points earned percentage. 26th. So tell me one thing that was actually working here. And if you're going to write all that off as like, well, they didn't have Thomas and Broberg. Well, let me just say this. Congratulations to Robbie Thomas and Phil Broberg, because they obviously are Hall of Fame players. They're going to be future Hall of Famers. So let me be the first to congratulate them. You don't make excuses for that across the board failure, and it was getting worse by the day. I mean, the Blues, actually, I was a nice guy, and I threw in that 5-1 win over Toronto back on October the 24th. That was Thomas's game where he got hurt late in the game. The Blues, since that day, and this is exactly 1 month because today's November the 24th, they have the worst record in the league. But what? So a couple of injuries like that justifies that the house fell down? Come on. You're smarter than that. We're all smarter and better than that. And the other thing is that I think Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer could be playing better. Certainly some games they could. But I cut them slack because they're under immense pressure to steal games or to keep the Blues really close in games where the Blues have no reason being close in a game. The breakdown of this team's offense and the acute goal shortage leaves these goaltenders more vulnerable, and they got to be Superman every night, and that's not fair. So let me back that up with facts, as I like to do. And pay attention to this because this matters. The lack of goal scoring is killing this team, right? Killing this team. Facts. The previous 2 seasons when the Blues allowed 3 goals or less in a game, the previous 2 seasons, they had an .802 winning percentage, points earned percentage. .802. That ranked 7th best in the National Hockey League. So good goaltending, you limit the other side to no more than 3 goals. .802 points earned percentage. And that's because the Blues gave their guys, their goalies, they gave them reasonable amount of goal support. And they could handle the rest and give the Blues a really outstanding record when they limit the other side to 3 goals. So how about this year? How about this year? When they give up 3 goals or less, the Blues have a points percentage of .667. That's not bad, but it ranks 20th in the league, and it ain't .802. That's because of the big drop in goals that they have been able to score. Not many, because of this sludgy, ineffective, stalled-out offense, especially at 5-on-5. And another reason, this is very important, another reason why this coaching change was so essential, the decline in productivity, as I alluded to, that we've been seeing from some of the most vital forwards. And most of those forwards are still considered pretty young. It's all relative. Robert Thomas, this year, his rate of goals per 60 minutes is down. It is way down. His rate of points per 60 minutes is down. Jordan Kyrou is scoring fewer goals per 60 minutes than he did last year, even the year before that, I'm pretty sure. Pavel Buchnevich isn't a kid. He's not old either, but he's not a kid. Buchnevich is scoring fewer goals per 60 minutes, dishing out fewer assists per 60 minutes, and his current rate of points per 60 minutes would be the worst of his career. Has anybody seen Zach Balduke lately? I'm not saying the kid's a finished product. He's young and he's learning and he makes some mistakes. But we saw him do some impressive things late last season, I'm sorry to say. And he's disappeared. He doesn't have a goal in 16 games, and Bannister has been scratching him from the lineup. That's scary to me. Jake Neighbors' rates are down this season in goals and assists and points per 60 minutes. Jake Neighbors was a huge asset last season. Why do this whole group of players that really need to come through for the Blues, why is everything in decline as far as their productivity? And these guys that I mentioned here, they're not all of them. I'm just talking about maybe prime year guys, right? And 2 young guys that are the Blues' future who have shown they can play. That's kind of scary because they should be leading your offense with help from their friends, of course. And also it's scary because the Blues have a couple other gems, at least forward line gems, on the way, including Dvorsky and Snuggerud. The younger talent can't be just kind of withering and crinkling up on the vine. This just can't happen, or the Blues are in serious trouble long term. And as a Berube assistant, Montgomery received a lot of praise for his work with Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich. Buchnevich, as I mentioned the other day, has told people that working with Montgomery just made him a much better player in every way, and he's grateful to him. Montgomery's coaching when they were transforming the offense under Berube said, we got to play faster. I need you really to kind of get Kyrou and Thomas going a little more in this new style. We got to coach them up because this is different. You just go back and look at what Kyrou and Thomas did, especially the second season when Montgomery was an assistant here. You have to look at your future. You may think you can still make the playoffs this year, but more importantly, you got to look at the future too, because this decision impacts the future. And Montgomery is a player's coach, and he's a guy that has worked well with young players, period. That's his record. The Blues are also supposed to provide entertainment, yes? They've come up really short on that objective. This season, the Blues are 5-6 at Enterprise Center. Their .455 home ice percentage is 26th in the league. Fans are paying good money for those tickets. The Blues have averaged only 2.16 goals per 60 minutes at home. That ranks 31st home scoring among the 32 teams. Is that entertainment? I would surmise that you would say no, right? So, as a Blues assistant, not only did Montgomery do beautiful work with some of their young and upcoming players and made Buchnevich a more complete player, but when he was in charge of the power play improved. When he was in charge, it's okay, you got that. Now I need you to take care of the penalty kill. It's bad. When he was put in charge of the penalty kill, that improved pretty dramatically. And the younger forwards really started to thrive under him. I did some research earlier today, and I want to share this with you. Among coaches in the NHL, listen to this one. Among coaches in the NHL that have had at least 298 career games behind the bench, that's what Montgomery has had. 298 games as a head coach, Dallas and then Boston. So among coaches that have at least 298 career games behind the bench, Montgomery's points percentage, .659, is the fourth best in NHL history among coaches that have worked at least 298 games. Fourth best in the league's history. And again, I mentioned it earlier, I'll mention again. Yeah, results have been disappointing in the postseason for him, although he nearly knocked the Blues out of the playoffs in 2019. I remember that wide open net. Somehow the Stars could not put the puck away in, and they would have won Game 7, right? So Montgomery's really good at what he does. The postseason success depends on a lot of things, but yeah, once the Blues are built up to a like more talent, deeper talent, or whatever, yeah, his job will be to win in the postseason. But there's no reason to fuss about that because you got to save the team in terms of how it plays in the regular season, or would everybody prefer to keep missing the playoffs, right? This is an urgency matter, and it just so happens you got a coach now that fits your longer term objectives as well. And if you downgrade Monty, I don't know why you would, because he's gotten fired twice. Well, Dallas, it was personal problems. He had a serious issue with alcohol. He knew it. He went into rehab. He went into other programs. He's got a network of people who help him. He's turned his life around, has shown tremendous character to do so, and willpower and strength and everything else you need. And he only got fired in Dallas because his drinking was out of control. But by every indication, he has conquered those demons, and he's doing the diligence, doing the preventative work, the vital work to make sure he stays on this great course that he's on, where his life has changed and he's put it behind him, although you never put it behind him, which is why I admire the fact he's staying true to all of the things he's doing in terms of programs and dealing with people, working with other people to make sure that he stays strong. Conscientious guy. So he got fired there for non-hockey reasons, so to speak. And then keep in mind about Don Sweeney, who fired Claude. He fired Claude Julien, who won the 2011 Stanley Cup as the Bruins coach. He fired Bruce Cassidy, who had a 672 points percentage. That's really good as the Bruins coach, and got the Bruins to the 2019 Stanley Cup final where they lost to this team down the street. But after getting dismissed by Don Sweeney, Cassidy pivoted to Vegas and led the Golden Knights to the Stanley Cup. So now Sweeney has fired the coach with the league's best record since the start of 22-23, and he's coming to St. Louis. I mean, that kind of bodes well, right? Sweeney, Armstrong's fired some good coaches too. So I'll discontinue. With that, I said earlier there were problems between the two. Now, I don't know if you know who Elliot Friedman is. He's legendary up in Toronto. Very popular, very well connected, very influential hockey columnist, podcaster. He laid it out in a recent podcast. Here's what Friedman said the other day about the Montgomery firing, and I quote, these are all quotes. I don't think it's as simple as they made Montgomery an offer and they couldn't come to a deal, and now all of a sudden it's over. No, the team's not winning, and we're going in a different direction. He was saying that's not the reason entirely. And Friedman said, quote, I think it was deeper than that. I don't know if Sweeney and Montgomery saw the future the same way. Friedman added this, and I quote, picking assistant coaches, that was a bit of bone of contention between the two of them. Again, it's pretty obvious that they were not seeing eye to eye on things. And when that happens, a coach is going to hit the road. Pack your knives and go, as they say on Top Chef. But in Montgomery, the Blues have someone who's one of their own. And keep in mind, after Montgomery crashed in Dallas, Doug Armstrong revived his career because teams were afraid. Well, I don't know what he's doing. Is it safe to hire him? Monty put him together, and Berube made the choice ultimately. But Montgomery got his second chance with the Blues, and it led to a big-time head coaching job at the Bruins, one of the original six. And Montgomery is eternally grateful for that, and he's eternally grateful to come home. The bond between the Blues and their new head coach is strong. We mentioned the family connection. Now his kids and his wife, brothers and sisters, cousins, family, they're delighted to be coming home. And I think it just means a little more to Monty because it's personal as well as professional. I think this is corny, what I'm about to say, and I'm almost done. This was meant to be. Some things are meant to be, and I think this is one of them. So Armstrong did what anybody who's trying to raise a franchise to a higher level again, to get there again, you got to take advantage of opportunities, and he took advantage to make a major upgrade at the coaching position. And let me just say this, final thoughts, I promise. Had Doug Armstrong let this opportunity slip away and stayed with Drew Bannister while Montgomery resurfaces in Nashville and all of a sudden fixes them and they're on their way zooming past the Blues. Just one example. If Army had let the opportunity slip away, I think I'd be doing a video. In fact, I would have done a video saying, listen, Doug Armstrong's been great at his job overall. He's had some bad decisions lately with some money spent, but I think it's time for him to move up his retirement. Because if you're going to let Jim Montgomery get away, someone you love and respect and really desperately wanted to hire several months ago, earlier this year, if you're not going to do that because you don't want to hurt Drew Bannister's feelings, well, the same guy that fired Ken Hitchcock and our guy Craig Berube, well, that would tell me that Doug Armstrong's too soft for this job, and he's already thinking too much about retirement, and that his priorities are all screwed up. But he didn't do that, and I didn't think he would do that. Like I said, I pushed hard for them to do this, and I talked about it, wrote about it. I know Jeremy Rutherford got into some trouble with Blues people because at The Athletic, because he had the actual journalistic integrity to say, hey, this could happen. Armstrong could make this move. It's entirely possible. And it ain't easy for a guy like JR to go face Drew Bannister after that, right? But this was a newsy event. Doug Armstrong's handpicked coach. Oh, he's now available? 22 games into the season, and the Army, whether you laugh at him or not, thinks that this is a playoff team? Well, you better act now, and that's why I thought he would take action. I mean, Doug Armstrong's a serious man. We can list his faults, but he ain't no lightweight, all right? So I think I just like this. It's going to re-energize the fan base. It's going to re-energize the team. The Blues are going to be a lot more interesting. They were putting me to sleep, a lot of you to sleep. A lot more interesting now. He had a chance to finally get the coach in here that he wanted all along. Alex Steen, the general manager in waiting, is fully on board with Montgomery, who got a 5-year contract, so everything's stable. I got one more thing to say, and very quickly. Welcome home to St. Louis, Monty. And I hope that this will be very, very successful, not only for you and the team, but for the fans and people who love Blues hockey. That'll do it. 41 minutes. I think that's a record. I'm sorry. If you stuck with me, thank you. We'll be back tomorrow here on The Bernie Show.